I was standing in the marble lobby of the Azure Crown, one of the city's most expensive restaurants, watching a kid in designer clothes spit at my boots. He didn't know those boots had walked through 14 countries, seen 3 wars, and carried a Delta Force operator through missions that would never make the news. He thought I was trash. They all did. But 10 years ago, in this same city, on a street corner 6 blocks from here, I had been trash. Or at least, that's what the cops told the judge when they planted cocaine in my coat and sent me away for a decade. I was 28 years old, fresh out of my first Army deployment, trying to find my footing in civilian life. I never got the chance. What happened that night destroyed one version of my life and forged another in blood, sweat, and an unbreakable promise. I would come back. And when I did, I would make them remember my name. March 2016. I remember the taste of Chicago air when I stepped off the bus at Union Station, cold, metallic, mixed with diesel exhaust and the smell of 1 million people pressed together in a city that never slept. I'd been gone 6 years. 6 years of sand, heat, gunfire, and the particular silence that comes after an IED detonates and your ears stop working for 30 seconds. 6 years of being Staff Sergeant Daniel Cross, 101st Airborne, infantry squad leader, the guy who kept his people alive. Now I was just Daniel Cross, civilian, with $3,400 in savings, a duffel bag full of uniforms I'd probably never wear again, and absolutely no idea what came next. The Army gives you structure, wake-up time, chow time, training time, mission time, sleep time, every hour accounted for, every decision made by someone up the chain. When you get out, that structure evaporates, and you're standing in the middle of a city with 8 million people, and none of them give a damn that you spent the last 6 years serving your country. I stayed in a cheap motel the first week, $40 a night, cockroaches included, while I looked for an apartment. The VA office gave me pamphlets about education benefits, job placement programs, counseling services. The woman behind the desk had kind eyes and a tired smile. She'd seen 1,000 guys like me come through, all of us trying to figure out how to be normal again. "Give yourself time," she said. "It's an adjustment." Time. Right. I had plenty of that now. I found an apartment in Englewood's South Side. The landlord didn't run a credit check, just took my first month's rent and security deposit in cash and handed me keys that looked like they'd been cut in the 1970s. The apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building that smelled like mildew and fried food. 1 bedroom, kitchenette, bathroom with tiles that had probably been white once, but were now a dingy yellow-gray. The window looked out over a street where cars sat on cinder blocks, and every other building had plywood over the windows. At night, I could hear music thumping from someone's apartment, arguments in Spanish and English, the occasional crack of gunfire in the distance. It wasn't Afghanistan, but it wasn't exactly safe either. I got a job at a warehouse in Cicero, Midwest Logistics, a massive facility that handled distribution for a dozen retail chains. The pay was $11.50 an hour, night shift, loading trucks in a cavernous space that echoed with the beep of forklifts and the shouts of supervisors. My boss was a 22-year-old kid named Trevor, who'd graduated with a business degree and thought that meant he knew everything about management. "You're 3 minutes late," he said on my 4th day, checking his watch like he was a drill sergeant instead of a kid with barely enough facial hair to shave. "Bus broke down," I said. "Not my problem." "You need to manage your time better." I bit back about 50 responses, about time management in combat zones, about keeping 19-year-olds alive when mortars are falling, about what real responsibility looked like, and just nodded. "Won't happen again." See that it doesn't. The work was mindless, Load boxes onto pallets, wrap pallets in plastic, move pallets onto trucks, repeat for 8 hours. My body could do it on autopilot. I was still in decent shape from the army. But my mind wandered. I'd think about my squad, wonder what they were doing, whether they were still deployed, still safe. I'd think about the firefight outside Kandahar where we'd lost Martinez, how he'd been laughing about his daughter's birthday party 1 minute and gone the next. I'd think about how none of it seemed to matter here, in this warehouse, loading boxes of consumer goods that would be on sale by next week. But I didn't complain. I'd survived worse. This was just the next mission. Survive, adapt, find a foothold. The neighborhood taught me new rules. In the army, you knew who the enemy was. They were the ones shooting at you. In Englewood, the lines were blurrier. The guys on the corner slinging drugs weren't necessarily bad people. Some were kids trying to feed younger siblings. Some were addicts funding habits. Some were predators. You learned to read intentions, to nod respectfully, to keep your head down. I walked the same route every day. Bus stop to apartment, apartment to bus stop. Past Mrs. Chen's corner store where she sold cigarettes and lottery tickets from behind bulletproof glass. Past the playground where the swings had been stolen and teenagers congregated at night. Past the bodega run by a Dominican guy named Rafael who made the best Pernal's sandwiches I'd ever tasted. People recognized me after a few weeks. The silent guy in the army jacket who walked with his head up and his shoulders back. Who didn't hassle anybody, but didn't look like a victim either. Raphael started nodding when I came in. Mrs. Chen said, "Good morning, soldier," when I bought coffee. The kids on the corner stopped watching me like I was a threat or a mark. I was just another person trying to survive. Then I met Officers Bradley Marks and Vincent Caruso. Chapter 2. The Predators. I first saw them on a Tuesday evening in late February. I'd just gotten off shift, was walking toward the bus stop, when a squad car rolled past, slowly. The kind of slow that's meant to intimidate, to remind you that they're watching. 2 cops inside. The driver was mid-30s, square jaw, buzz cut, the kind of build that came from weightlifting and protein shakes. His partner was older, maybe 45, with a gut that hung over his belt and eyes that moved like a reptile's. Cold, calculating, assessing threats and opportunities. The driver, I'd later learn his name was Bradley Marks, made eye contact with me, held it for 3 seconds. Then the car moved on. I thought nothing of it. Cops patrolled. That was their job. But over the next few weeks, I saw them everywhere. Parked outside Raphael's bodega, engine idling, watching who came and went. Hassling kids on the corner, making them empty their pockets, laughing when they found nothing. Pulling over cars for broken taillights and searching them without probable cause. Everyone in the neighborhood knew they were dirty. You could see it in how people tensed when their squad car appeared, how conversations died, how dealers melted into shadows. Raphael told me over a sandwich one day, his voice low. Those two, Marks and Caruso, they're bad news, man. They shake people down, take product from dealers, resell it. Nobody reports them because who's going to believe us over cops? You could go to internal affairs, I said. Raphael laughed, but there was no humor in it. Internal affairs? Man, you know who Mark's father is? Deputy Chief Harold Marks. 3 generations of cops in that family. You think IA is going to do anything? I didn't have an answer for that. I started paying more attention, watching. Old habits from the Army, situational awareness, pattern recognition, threat assessment. I saw Marks and Caruso meet with a dealer named Ricky Salazar behind an abandoned gas station. Saw money change hands. Saw Salazar hand over a brick of something wrapped in plastic. They weren't just dirty. They were actively criminal. But what could I do? I was nobody. A warehouse worker with no connections, no power, no leverage. Reporting them would mean painting a target on my own back. And for what? The system would protect them. It always did. So I kept my head down, went to work, came home, tried to build something resembling a normal life. Then came March 15th, the IDs of March, the day Julius Caesar learned that trust was a fatal weakness. I should have paid attention to the historical parallel. Chapter 3. The Night. My shift ended at 4 a.m. The warehouse was a 30-minute bus ride from my apartment. But at 4 a.m., buses ran every 90 minutes. I'd learned quickly that it was faster to walk the first mile to a different bus stop where the schedule was better. The route took me through an industrial area, abandoned factories, empty parking lots, the kind of urban wasteland that cities pretend doesn't exist. There was an alley that cut behind an old textile factory, saving me about 10 minutes. I'd walked it 100 times, never saw anyone, never had a problem. Tonight, I heard voices halfway through. I slowed instinctively. In Afghanistan, voices in the dark meant potential contact. You didn't walk into situations blind. You assessed, you waited, you gathered intelligence. Two figures stood about 40 feet ahead, under a street light that flickered like it was trying to decide whether to give up completely. One was Ricky Salazar. I recognized his profile, the distinctive scar that ran down his left cheek. The other was a kid, 17 at most, skinny as a rail, wearing a hoodie 3 sizes too big. Salazar was yelling. I couldn't make out all the words, but the tone was clear. Threat, escalation, violence building like a storm. The kid was pleading, stammering, crying. I should have turned around, should have taken the long way. This wasn't my fight. I wasn't a soldier anymore. I was just a guy trying to get home. But then Salazar pulled out a gun. Chrome-plated .38 special. The kind of cheap Saturday night special you could buy off the street for $150. He pressed it against the kid's forehead, and the kid's legs buckled. He dropped to his knees, hands raised, begging. My body moved before my brain caught up. "Hey!" My voice echoed off brick walls, and both of them spun toward me. Salazar's gun swung in my direction, and I raised my hands, palms out, showing I wasn't a threat. "Easy, I'm just passing through." "Who the fuck are you?" Salazar's pupils were dilated, eyes glassy, high on something. That made him unpredictable, dangerous. "Nobody, just going home. Don't want any trouble." "Yeah? Well, nobody. You just bought yourself a world of trouble." He turned back to the kid, and I saw his finger move toward the trigger. I closed the distance in 4 strides. Muscle memory from combatives training took over. Grabbed his wrist, twisted hard, rotated his arm until the gun clattered to the pavement. He swung at me with his free hand, wild, uncoordinated, and I ducked under it, swept his legs, put him face first into the asphalt. He thrashed, screaming obscenities in English and Spanish. I held him down with one knee in his back, not pressing hard enough to injure, but hard enough to control. The kid scrambled to his feet and ran, footsteps echoing and fading into the night. "You're making a huge mistake." Salazar snarled into the pavement. "You know who I work with?" "Don't care. You were about to kill a kid." "That kid stole from me. Sirens cut him off. 2 squad cars screeched into the alley from both ends, lights painting everything in alternating red and blue. 4 cops jumped out, weapons drawn, flashlights cutting through the dark. And leading them were officers Bradley Marks and Vincent Caruso. "Hands up! Get off him! Now!" Marks was shouting, his service weapon pointed at my head. I released Salazar immediately and raised my hands. He had a gun. He was going to shoot. I said, hands up, on the ground, face down. I complied, dropped to my knees, then onto my stomach, hands behind my head. Standard procedure. I'd been through similar drills in military police training. Stay calm, follow instructions, explain the situation once they secured the scene. The gun was right there, 3 feet away on the ground. They'd see it, collect it as evidence, talk to Salazar, realize I'd stopped a murder. That's what should have happened. Instead, Marks kicked me in the ribs. Hard enough that I heard something crack, hard enough that my breath exploded out of my lungs and I couldn't inhale for 5 seconds. Caruso yanked my arms behind my back, cuffed me so tight the metal bit into my wrists, drawing blood. They hauled me to my feet, and that's when I saw Salazar. He was standing now, brushing dirt off his jacket, and Marks was clapping him on the shoulder like they were old friends. "You okay, Ricky?" Salazar nodded, smiling. "Yeah, man. Thanks for getting here so fast. This psycho came out of nowhere, just started attacking me." My stomach dropped. What? No, he had a gun. He was threatening a kid. "Shut your mouth," Caruso snarled, slamming me against the squad car hard enough that my head bounced off the roof. "The gun is right there." I tried to twist, to point, but Mark stepped into my line of sight, blocking my view of the ground where the .38 had fallen. "What gun?" His smile was slow, predatory. "I don't see any gun." I looked past him. The spot where the gun had been was empty. While they'd been cuffing me, one of the other officers, I couldn't see which, had pocketed it. "You're making a mistake," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. "I'm a veteran. I served 6 years, just got out. I was trying to help." "A veteran?" Caruso laughed. "Let me guess. Dishonorable discharge? Couldn't hack it? Or did you just get tired of following orders?" "Honorable discharge. Staff Sergeant, 101st Airborne." "Sure you were." Marks opened the back door of the squad car. "Get in." They drove me to the 7th District Station, a squat concrete building that looked more like a bunker than a police headquarters. Took me through a side entrance, past booking, into an interrogation room in the back. Cinder block walls painted industrial beige. Metal table bolted to the floor. 2 chairs. A camera in the corner with a red light that wasn't on. They cuffed me to the table and left me there. For 6 hours. No water, no bathroom break, no explanation. Just me, the cuffs and the fluorescent lights that buzzed like dying insects overhead. I used the time to think, to run through what had happened, looking for where I'd made a mistake. Should I have walked away? Probably. Should I have called 911 instead of intervening? Maybe. But that kid would be dead. I'd saved his life. That had to count for something. It didn't. Part 2. The Frame, Chapter 4. The Deputy Chief. When the door finally opened, 3 people walked in. Marks and Caruso looked smug, satisfied. The third man was older, mid-60s, with silver hair, a $2,000 suit, and the kind of face that had seen everything and been impressed by none of it. Deputy Chief Harold Marks, Bradley's father. He sat down across from me, opened a folder, and studied its contents for a full minute before looking up. Daniel Cross, age 28, honorably discharged from the Army 3 months ago. Currently employed at Midwest Logistics, living in Englewood in a shithole apartment you can barely afford. He closed the folder. "You're nobody." "I didn't do anything wrong." "You assaulted Ricky Salazar. You attacked him without provocation in an alley at 4 a.m. My officers witnessed you on top of him, beating him." "That's a lie. He had a gun. He was going to kill a kid." "There was no gun. There was no kid. There was just you, a violent ex-soldier who couldn't adjust to civilian life and decided to take out his frustrations on an innocent man. He's a drug dealer. He works with your son. I've seen them together, taking money, taking product. The deputy chief's hand moved so fast, I barely saw it. He slammed his palm on the metal table, and the sound cracked like a gunshot in the small room. You want to be very careful about what you say next, he said quietly. Because right now, you're looking at simple assault. Maybe 2 years if you plead guilty, less with good behavior. But if you start making wild accusations about police officers, about my son, then things get much more complicated for you. I stared at him, understanding finally clicking into place. This wasn't about justice. This was about protection. They were covering for Salazar because he was an asset, a source of income, and I'd become a problem. I want a lawyer. Of course you do. The deputy chief stood, buttoning his suit jacket. You'll get a public defender. They're very dedicated, overworked, underpaid, but dedicated. He walked to the door, then paused. You could make this easy on yourself, Mr. Cross. Plead guilty. Do your time. Get out in 2 years and start over. Or you can fight it, and we'll make sure you regret every second. I didn't do anything wrong. Yes, he said, opening the door. You did. You made my son's life difficult. And that's something I don't tolerate. They left me there for another 3 hours. Then Caruso came back alone, holding a plastic evidence bag. Inside was a small Ziploc filled with white powder. Maybe 20 grams. He tossed it on the table. Found this in your coat pocket during booking. I looked at it, then at him. That's not mine. Sure it's not. You planted that. He leaned in close, his breath smelling like coffee and tobacco. Here's how this works, Cross. You're a violent vet with PTSD who attacked a citizen and had cocaine on him. That's the story. That's what goes in the report. That's what the prosecutor will argue. And that's what the jury will believe. Why are you doing this? Because we can. He smiled. Because you're nobody, and nobody's going to miss you. They charged me with aggravated assault and possession with intent to distribute. My bail was set at $50,000. I had $3,200 in my bank account. I stayed in Cook County Jail for 8 months waiting for trial. The public defender they assigned me was a woman named Janet Kowalski. She looked like she hadn't slept in a week. She met with me twice before the trial, 15 minutes each time. You should take the plea deal, she said during our second meeting. The prosecutor's offering 8 years if you plead guilty to both charges. I'm innocent. The evidence says otherwise. They have 2 police officers who will testify they found you beating the victim. They have drugs found on your person. They have no witnesses to support your version of events. What about the kid? The one Salazar was threatening? No one's been able to locate any kid, and Salazar says he was alone. What about Salazar's gun? There was no gun recovered at the scene, because they took it. She sighed. Mr. Cross, I understand you're frustrated. But the reality is, if we go to trial, you're looking at 20 years minimum. The prosecutor will paint you as a dangerous veteran who couldn't reintegrate, who turned to drugs and violence. They'll bring up PTSD, combat experience, your training in hand-to-hand combat. They'll make you look like a ticking time bomb. So what do you suggest? Take the plea, 8 years. You'll be out in 5 with good behavior. I'm innocent. Then we go to trial and hope for the best. We went to trial. Chapter 5. The trial. The trial lasted 4 days. The courtroom was exactly like every legal drama on TV. Wood paneling, American flag. Judge's bench elevated above everyone else. Judge Patricia Morrison presiding, a woman in her late 50s who'd been on the bench for 20 years and had seen everything. The prosecution's case was simple and devastating. Day 1, they called Ricky Salazar. He took the stand wearing a suit that probably cost more than I made in a month, looking respectable and scared. He testified that he'd been walking through the alley when I attacked him from behind, threw him to the ground, started beating him. "Did you know the defendant?" the prosecutor asked. "No, sir. Never seen him before in my life." "Did you do anything to provoke this attack?" "No, sir. I was just walking home from my girlfriend's place." My lawyer cross-examined him, but it was weak. She asked if he'd ever been arrested. Objection sustained. Asked if he knew Officers Marks and Caruso personally. "I've seen them around the neighborhood, like everyone else." Asked why someone would attack him unprovoked. "I don't know. Maybe he wanted to rob me." Day 2, Officers Marks and Caruso testified. They described responding to a 911 call about a disturbance in the alley. When they arrived, they found me on top of Salazar, hitting him. "The defendant was extremely agitated," Marks said. "We ordered him to get down, and he complied. But he was combative, making wild accusations." "What kind of accusations?" "He claimed Mr. Salazar had a gun and was threatening a child. We searched the area thoroughly and found no weapon and no child." The prosecutor showed photos of Salazar's injuries, bruises on his face, a split lip. Then photos of me at booking, no injuries except the bloody wrists from the cuffs. "Who appeared to be the aggressor in this situation, Officer Marks?" "The defendant, sir." Caruso's testimony was almost identical. They'd rehearsed this, synchronized their stories perfectly. Day 3, they brought in the evidence tech who'd processed me at booking. He testified finding a Ziploc bag with 22 grams of cocaine in my coat pocket. "Was the defendant cooperative during booking?" "No, sir. He was belligerent, claiming the drugs weren't his, that officers had planted them." "In your 12 years as an evidence technician, how many times have you heard suspects claim drugs weren't theirs?" "Dozens of times, sir. It's very common." My lawyer barely cross-examined him. Day 4, I took the stand. It was a mistake, but I insisted. I needed to tell the truth, needed someone to hear what really happened. I told my story. The kid, the gun, Salazar threatening to kill him, intervening, the gun disappearing, the cocaine being planted. The prosecutor tore me apart. "Mr. Cross, you claim you served in Afghanistan. Is it true that you saw combat?" "Yes." "Witnessed violence, death?" "Yes." "And when you returned to civilian life, did you seek any counseling for PTSD?" "No." "Why not?" "I didn't need it." "You didn't think that spending years in a war zone, witnessing violence, might affect your mental state?" "Objection," my lawyer said weakly. "Speculation." "Overruled. Answer the question, Mr. Cross." "It affected me, but I was managing fine." "Were you?" The prosecutor pulled out my employment records. "You'd been written up 3 times at your job for lateness. Your supervisor noted you seemed distracted and irritable. Does that sound like someone who's managing fine?" It went on for an hour. By the time I stepped down, I could see the jury had already made up their minds. My lawyer called no other witnesses. We had nothing. No evidence, no one to corroborate my story. Nothing but my word against 2 cops and a victim. Closing arguments took 30 minutes each. The prosecutor painted me as a violent, unstable veteran who'd snapped. My lawyer gave a half-hearted speech about reasonable doubt. The jury deliberated for 4 hours, guilty on both counts. Judge Morrison scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks later. I spent those 2 weeks in county lockup, replaying everything, searching for the moment where I could have done something different. Sentencing day, Judge Morrison looked at me for the first time. Really looked at me. "Mr. Cross, you served your country, and for that, you have my respect. But that service doesn't give you the right to assault citizens and distribute drugs in my city. I'm sentencing you to 10 years in Illinois Department of Corrections, with eligibility for parole after 7. The gavel came down like the closing of a tomb door. Part 3. The Forge. Chapter 6. Stateville Correctional Center. Maximum security. Built in 1925. Designed on the panopticon principle. A central guard tower with cell blocks radiating out like spokes on a wheel. From the tower, guards could see into every cell. The theory was that constant surveillance would control behavior. The reality was that Stateville was a concrete hell where the strong survived and the weak became prey. They processed me on a Tuesday. Stripped, searched, deloused, fingerprinted, photographed. Issued orange scrubs, white boxers, white socks, and plastic slides. Given a bedroll, thin mattress, thinner blanket, pillow that felt like it was stuffed with cardboard, and assigned to F House, cell 237. My cellmate was a guy named Marcus Washington, 42 years old, doing 25 for armed robbery. He looked up when the guard locked me in, assessed me with eyes that had seen everything, and went back to his book. "Bottom bunk's yours," he said. "Don't touch my stuff, don't make noise after 10, and we'll get along fine." "Thanks." "You Army." I looked at him, surprised. "How'd you know?" "Way you stand. Way you folded that bedroll. My brother served. Marines." He nodded at the tattoo on my forearm. 101st Airborne insignia. "Afghanistan?" "Yeah." "Then you'll survive this place. Compared to that shit, this is easy." He was wrong. Combat is clean, in its way. You know who the enemy is. You know the objective. You follow orders, complete the mission, get home. The stress is intense but structured. Prison is different. It's a slow grinding down of everything that makes you human. Every day is the same. Wake at 5:30 a.m. to a bell that sounds like the gates of hell opening. Stand for count. Breakfast in a cafeteria that smells like industrial cleaner and despair. Back to your cell. Out for work detail or rec yard. Lunch, cell, dinner, cell. Count again. Lights out. Days blur into weeks, blur into months. The worst part isn't the violence, though there's plenty of that. Fights in the yard, stabbings in the showers, guards who look the other way because paperwork is a hassle. The worst part is the soul-crushing knowledge that you're invisible. Forgotten. That the world outside is continuing without you, and no one cares that you're in here. For the first 6 months, I thought about suicide every single day. I'd lie on that thin mattress, staring at the concrete ceiling 8 feet above me, and mentally compose goodbye letters to people I'd lost touch with. My squad from Afghanistan, my mother, who died from cancer when I was 23, my father, who disappeared when I was 8. There was no one who'd miss me, no one who'd wonder where I went. I was exactly what the deputy chief had said. Nobody. But somewhere around month 7, lying in that cell, listening to Marcus snore on the bunk above me, something shifted. I got angry. Not the hot, explosive anger that leads to stupid decisions. Cold anger, focused anger, the kind of anger that burns like a forge and turns iron into steel. I was innocent. I'd done the right thing. Saved a kid's life, and been punished for it. The system had failed. The people sworn to protect and serve had betrayed their oaths. And I was here, invisible and forgotten, while they were out there living their lives, collecting paychecks, destroying other people with the same casual cruelty they'd shown me. If I gave up, they won. If I let this place break me, they won. If I died here, they won. I decided they weren't going to win. Chapter 7. Transformation. I started with the basics. Physical training. The rec yard had a pull-up bar, a couple of benches, free weights that had been there since the 1980s. I made a schedule. Every day, rain or shine, 1 hour of training. Push-ups, pull-ups, squats, burpees, sprints across the yard. The other inmates thought I was crazy at first. This skinny white guy running laps while everyone else played cards or basketball. But after a few weeks, they left me alone. In prison, you respect consistency. You respect discipline. I gained 20 pounds of muscle in the first year, then 30, then 40. By year 3, I was bench pressing 300 pounds and doing one-armed pull-ups. But muscle wasn't enough. I needed knowledge. The prison library was a joke. Maybe 300 books, half of them paperback romances and westerns donated by church groups. But scattered among the trash were gems: military history, strategy, biographies of generals and warriors. I read everything. Sun Tzu's Art of War, Clausewitz's On War, Machiavelli's The Prince, Rommel's Infantry Tactics, Marine Corps manuals on guerrilla warfare. I absorbed it all, taking notes on scraps of paper, committing key passages to memory. I read legal textbooks, criminal procedure, evidence law, constitutional rights. I learned how the system worked, where the cracks were, how corrupt cops operated, and how they protected themselves. I read psychology, manipulation tactics, interrogation resistance, how to read people, how to control conversations, how to turn an enemy's strength into weakness. Marcus noticed. "You building yourself a new degree in there?" he asked one night, watching me read by the dim light of our cell. "Something like that." "What are you planning, man?" I looked up at him. "When I get out of here, the people who put me away are going to regret it." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled. "Good. Fuck 'em." The violence found me in year 2. A guy named Torres, affiliated with the Latin Kings, decided I disrespected him by not moving fast enough in the chow line. He came at me in the yard with a shiv, a toothbrush handle melted and sharpened into a blade. I saw him coming from 15 feet away. Saw the intent in his eyes, the weapon palmed in his right hand. He thought he was fast. I was faster. Sidestepped his thrust, trapped his wrist, rotated his elbow until something popped. Took the shiv and threw it over the fence. Put him face down in the dirt with his arm twisted behind his back in a lock that would dislocate his shoulder if he moved wrong. The guards came running. They separated us, questioned witnesses. A dozen inmates said Torres started it, that I'd defended myself. Torres went to the infirmary and then to solitary. I went back to my cell. After that, people left me alone. Word spread. The quiet white guy who read books and worked out was also someone you didn't fuck with. But the most important transformation happened inside my head. In the military, I'd been a follower. A good one. Competent, reliable. Someone who executed orders without question. But I'd never thought strategically. I'd never planned 3 moves ahead. Prison taught me patience. Taught me to observe, to wait, to let my enemies make mistakes. Taught me that revenge isn't a dish best served hot. It's a dish best served cold, calculated, and absolutely devastating. Every 6 months, I thought about Marx, Caruso, the deputy chief, Salazar. I pictured them living their lives, thinking they'd gotten away with it. And I promised myself, one day I'd make them answer for what they'd done. Chapter 8. The Letter, Year 3, Month 4, Day 17. I was in the library, reading a book about Delta Force operations in Iraq, when the librarian, a civilian volunteer named Mrs. Patterson, who actually gave a damn about inmates, approached with an envelope. "This came for you, Daniel." I took it, surprised. I never got mail. There was no one to write to me. The envelope was plain white, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed. "Mr. Cross, my name is Colonel Richard Harlow, 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta. You don't know me, but I know your story. 2 years ago, a colleague of mine, someone who specializes in investigating corruption in law enforcement, flagged your case as suspicious. Drugs found in convenient locations. Testimony that aligned too perfectly. No physical evidence to support the alleged assault beyond superficial injuries. We conducted an informal investigation. We found inconsistencies in the police reports. We found that officers Marks and Caruso have been investigated 6 times for excessive force and evidence tampering, but never disciplined. We found financial records showing large cash deposits into their accounts that don't match their salaries. We found that Ricky Salazar has been arrested 12 times, but never convicted, always with Marks and Caruso as the arresting officers who somehow lose evidence. I believe you were framed. Unfortunately, I cannot prove it conclusively, not in a way that would overturn your conviction. The system is designed to protect itself, and the people who framed you have too many connections. But I can offer you something else. When you complete your sentence, if you're interested in serving your country again, not in the conventional military, but in a unit that operates outside normal chains of command, that handles problems other agencies can't or won't touch, contact me. First, SFODD doesn't accept applications. We recruit. And we recruit people who have been tested, who have survived hell, who have nothing to lose and everything to prove. Think about it. You have time. Colonel Richard Harlow. At the bottom was a phone number. I read the letter 3 times. Then I folded it carefully and put it in my pocket. Mrs. Patterson was watching me. "Good news?" "Maybe," I said. "Maybe the best news I've ever gotten." That letter became my lifeline. When the days felt endless, when the rage threatened to consume me, when I wondered if I'd survive another 7 years, I'd take out that letter and read it. Someone believed me. Someone saw through the lies. Someone thought I was worth something. I trained harder, read more, pushed myself further, because now I had a goal. Survive this place, get out, find Colonel Harlow, and become something those corrupt cops couldn't touch. The years ground on. Year 4, Year 5, Year 6. I watched men break, watched them give up, lose themselves to drugs or gangs or madness. Watched them get shanked in the showers or hang themselves in their cells. I watched Marcus get paroled in Year 4. He shook my hand before he left. "You're going to make it, Cross. And when you do, you're going to be something special." I got a new cellmate, a kid named Devin, 22 and for car theft. I mentored him the way Marcus had mentored me, kept him out of gang politics, taught him to read better, made sure he survived. Year 7, parole hearing. I went before the board. 3 people who decide if I was safe to release into society. "Mr. Cross, you've been a model prisoner," the chairwoman said, reviewing my file. "No incidents of violence since your altercation with Mr. Torres in Year 2. You've completed your GED and several vocational courses. You've worked in the prison library and received excellent evaluations. Thank you, ma'am. However, your conviction was for violent assault and drug distribution. The board has concerns about releasing you early. I understand. Do you take responsibility for your actions? I looked at her. If I said yes, I was admitting guilt for something I didn't do. If I said no, I was demonstrating a lack of remorse and they'd deny parole. I take responsibility for where I am, I said carefully. I've used this time to become better, stronger, more disciplined. Whatever happens when I leave here, I won't be coming back. She studied me for a long moment. Then, parole denied. We'll review your case again in 3 years. I served the full 10 years, every single day. The morning they released me, I walked out of Stateville wearing donated clothes, jeans, a t-shirt, a jacket, with $47 in my pocket and a bus ticket to Chicago. Colonel Harlow was waiting in the parking lot, leaning against an unmarked SUV. He was older than I'd pictured, mid-50s, gray hair, the kind of weathered face that came from decades in the field. But his eyes were sharp, assessing, seeing through the civilian clothes to the soldier underneath. Colonel Harlow? He nodded. You're out. I am. Good. He opened the passenger door. Get in. We have a lot of work to do. I got in the SUV and we drove away from Stateville. I didn't look back. Part 4, Delta. Chapter 9. Selection: Colonel Harlow drove me to a motel outside Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Handed me a key, a duffel bag with clothes and toiletries, and a folder. Read that tonight, he said. Tomorrow morning, 0600, I'll pick you up. You'll meet the team. Then we'll see if you have what it takes. The folder contained an overview of Delta Force, officially known as 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta, the Army's premier counter-terrorism unit. Selection process, training pipeline, operational history. It was the hardest military training in the world. 6-month selection course with a historical pass rate of about 10%. Then another year of operator training course. Then years of specialized training in weapons, tactics, languages, demolitions, halo/scuba insertion, close quarters combat. Most candidates were already elite soldiers, Green Berets, Rangers, SEALs, with years of experience. I was an ex-con who'd been out of the military for 10 years. I should have been terrified. Instead, I felt alive for the first time in a decade. The next morning, Colonel Harlow took me to a nondescript building on the edge of Fort Bragg. Inside was a conference room with 12 other men, all around my age, all with that particular look of people who'd seen things and survived. Colonel Harlow stood at the front. Gentlemen, you're here because the traditional military failed you in one way or another. Some of you were wrongly discharged. Some were denied benefits you earned. Some, like Mr. Cross, were actively victimized by the system you served. He paced, hands behind his back. The Army failed you, but that doesn't mean you failed. You're here because you have something most soldiers don't, a personal reason to be better, stronger, more capable than everyone else. Anger, hunger, the need to prove something. That fire, properly directed, makes you dangerous in the best possible way. He stopped pacing, looked at each of us. First SFODD is not a normal unit. We don't recruit through traditional channels. We don't follow standard military protocols. We take people who've been tested by fire and forged into something harder than the regular military can produce. Over the next 6 months, we're going to break you down and rebuild you. 90% of you will quit or fail. The 10% who make it will become part of the most elite fighting force in the world. Questions? A man to my left raised his hand. Sir, is it true that Delta operators conduct missions that never appear in official records? Yes. And that we sometimes operate outside traditional rules of engagement? Yes. But understand this. We operate outside the rules, but never outside ethics. We don't torture. We don't target civilians. We don't commit war crimes. We're not murderers or criminals. We're surgical instruments deployed when conventional forces can't or won't act. He looked at me. Mr. Cross, you spent 10 years in prison for doing the right thing. In Delta, doing the right thing is the only thing that matters, even when it's hard, even when it costs you. Yes, sir. Good. Everyone get your gear. We start in 1 hour. Chapter 10. The Gauntlet. I can't describe Delta selection in detail. Much of it is classified. But I can tell you this. It was hell. Physical tests that pushed us to total failure. Forced marches with 70-pound rucksacks over mountain terrain. Navigation courses through swamps and forests with nothing but a map and compass. Sleep deprivation. Stress positions. Interrogation resistance training where instructors used every psychological trick to break us. Men quit every day. Some during a ruck march, just stopping and saying, "I'm done." Some during hand-to-hand combat training when they realized the level of violence required. Some during psychological evaluations when they couldn't handle the questions about their trauma, their anger, their capacity for controlled violence. By month 3, we were down to 6 candidates from 12. By month 5, 4. I survived because prison had already broken me once. This was nothing compared to Stateville. Physical pain. I'd endured worse. Psychological pressure. I'd spent 10 years with nothing but my thoughts. Sleep deprivation. Try sleeping in a cell where someone might shiv you at 3 a.m. Delta selection was intense, but it was also fair. If you did the work, if you proved yourself, you advanced. There was no corruption, no favoritism, no one planting evidence or lying about your performance. It was the first time since Afghanistan that I'd been part of something pure. The final test was a 5-day field exercise. They dropped us in the North Carolina wilderness with minimal gear and a series of objectives. We had to navigate 100 miles of terrain, conduct surveillance on a mock target, plan and execute a simulated raid, evade a hunter force, and extract to a pickup point. Solo. I completed it in 4 days with energy to spare. When the helicopter picked me up from the extraction point, Colonel Harlow was aboard. He handed me a bottle of water and nodded. "Welcome to Delta, Operator Cross." Out of 12 candidates, 3 of us made it through selection. Me, a former Marine Raider named Jake Sullivan, and a former Ranger named Maria Cortez. We spent the next year in operator training course. Weapons, tactics, languages. I learned Arabic and Pashto. Demolitions, advanced combat medicine, halo and scuba insertion, close quarters battle, counter-terrorism tactics. Then we deployed. Chapter 11. 7 years. I can't tell you where we went or what we did. The missions are classified, and they'll stay that way. But I can tell you this. For 7 years, I was part of something that mattered. We hunted terrorists, rescued hostages, stopped attacks before they happened, operated in places you'll never hear about, against enemies whose names will never be in the news. I was good at it. Better than good. I understood violence in a way most people don't, not as chaos, but as a tool. Precise, controlled, applied exactly where and when needed. I rose through the ranks. Sergeant, Staff Sergeant, Master Sergeant, Sergeant Major. And finally, after a mission in 2024 that I absolutely cannot discuss, I was commissioned as an officer. Lieutenant, captain, major, lieutenant colonel. And finally, in 2025, full colonel, one of only a handful in 1st SFODD. I commanded a squadron of the best operators in the world. People who trusted me with their lives. People I trusted with mine. But through all of it, through every deployment, every mission, every firefight, I never forgot Chicago. Never forgot Marks, Caruso, the deputy chief, Salazar. I kept files on them, updated every 6 months by intelligence contacts who owed me favors. I knew Marks and Caruso were still on the force, still working together, still dirty. I knew the deputy chief had been promoted to full chief before retiring with a generous pension. I knew Salazar had expanded his operation, moving from mid-level dealer to major distributor. And I knew they all thought they'd gotten away with it. That Daniel Cross was a forgotten convict who disappeared into the system. They were about to learn different. Part 5. The Return, Chapter 12. Going Ghost, February 2026. I requested 3 weeks of personal leave. Colonel Harlow approved it without questions. "Be careful," he said as I was leaving his office. "And don't do anything that'll end your career." "No promises, sir." He smiled. "Good hunting." I flew into Chicago on a commercial flight, carrying nothing but a small duffel. No weapons, no military gear, nothing that would identify me. I looked like any other traveler. At the airport, I went into a bathroom and changed. Swapped my clean jeans and jacket for clothes I'd bought from a thrift store months ago. Filthy pants, a torn coat, boots that looked like they'd walked 1,000 miles. Rubbed dirt on my face and hands. Messed up my hair. I walked out of that bathroom as a different person. Not Colonel Daniel Cross, Delta Force operator. Just another homeless veteran, invisible in a city that had thousands of us. I spent the first week learning the streets, where the shelters were, where the soup kitchens served, where the police patrolled, and where they didn't. I slept in doorways, under bridges, in the corners of subway stations. I panhandled for change. Most people walked past without seeing me, but some dropped coins or dollars into my cup. One woman, maybe 30, stopped and knelt down to make eye contact. "Have you eaten today?" "Yes, ma'am. Thank you." She handed me a $20. "There's a shelter on Harrison Street. They have beds." "I know. Thank you." She smiled sadly and walked away. People like her reminded me why I'd become a soldier, why I'd survived prison, why I was here. Because most people were good. Most people wanted to help. But the system, the corrupt cops, the indifferent officials, the predators who exploited the vulnerable, they made it impossible for goodness to win. I was here to fix that. The second week, I started surveillance. The Azure Crown restaurant, owned by the retired chief's brother-in-law, was a known meeting place for dirty cops and their associates. Upscale place in River North, marble floors, crystal chandeliers, $60 steaks. I watched from across the street, sitting on a bench with my cardboard sign, "Homeless vet, anything helps, God bless." Marks and Caruso showed up 3 times that week, always around 8 p.m., always together. They'd park their personal cars. Marks drove a BMW, Caruso a Mercedes, neither of which they should have been able to afford on a cop's salary, and walk in like they owned the place. The retired chief showed up twice, meeting with men in expensive suits. Politicians, probably, or lawyers, or both. Salazar showed up once, driving a Cadillac Escalade with custom rims. He walked in with 2 bodyguards, all of them laughing about something. They felt safe here. Untouchable. That was about to change. Chapter 13. The Trap Week 3. Friday night, February 13th. I'd chosen the date deliberately. Bad luck for them. I'd spent the previous week preparing, called in favors from intelligence contacts, got complete financial records for Marks, Caruso, and Salazar. Bank accounts, cash deposits, offshore transfers, everything. Got transcripts of wiretaps from an FBI investigation that had mysteriously been shut down 2 years ago. Got body camera footage from other officers that showed Marks and Caruso in compromising situations. I compiled it all into a comprehensive file and sent copies to 3 FBI agents I trusted, along with a federal prosecutor who'd made a career prosecuting corrupt cops. Gave them a date and time, Friday, February 13th, 8:30 p.m., the Azure Crown. Be there, I told them, and bring a tactical team. Friday evening, I walked into the Azure Crown at 8 p.m. Shuffled through the front door with my head down, shoulders hunched, every inch the homeless vet looking for a bathroom or maybe a handout. The hostess, mid-20s, designer dress, the kind of person who'd never been invisible in her life, wrinkled her nose. "Sir, I'm sorry, but this is a private establishment. Just need the bathroom," I mumbled, my voice gravelly. "Please, haven't been feeling well?" She hesitated, torn between compassion and disgust. Compassion won. Down the hall to the left. "Thank you, ma'am." I shuffled past her, eyes on the floor. The main dining room was packed. Businessmen, politicians, cops out of uniform. And there, at a corner table, were my targets. Officers Bradley Marks and Vincent Caruso, now in their mid to late 40s, softer around the middle, but still carrying themselves with that arrogant confidence. Sitting with them were 2 other men I didn't recognize. More cops, probably. And Ricky Salazar, fatter and older, but unmistakably the same person. They were laughing, drinking whiskey, celebrating something. I walked past their table, slow and shambling. Caruso glanced at me, his eyes flickering with disgust, then dismissing me immediately. I was beneath notice. I kept walking toward the bathroom. Once I was out of sight, I straightened up, rolled my shoulders, took a deep breath. Showtime. I walked back into the dining room, but this time I wasn't shuffling. I was walking tall, shoulders back, head up, military bearing. I stopped in the middle of the room and pulled off my filthy coat. Underneath, I was wearing a black tactical shirt, clean, fitted, and on the left shoulder, clear as day, the insignia of 1st SFODD, the sword and 3 lightning bolts, the mark of Delta Force. The room didn't go silent immediately. People were still talking, eating, drinking, but a few heads turned, then a few more. Marks looked up. Our eyes met. I watched the exact moment he recognized me. His face went pale. His hand, holding a glass of whiskey, froze halfway to his mouth. "Hello, Bradley," I said, my voice clear and carrying. "It's been a while." Caruso stood up fast, his chair scraping backward. His hand moved instinctively toward his hip, where he probably carried an off-duty weapon. "Who the fuck?" 10 years ago, I said. Louder now, projecting so everyone in the room could hear. "You framed me for assault and drug possession. You planted evidence. You lied under oath. You sent an innocent man to prison." Now the room was going silent. Phones were coming out. People were recording. "My name is Colonel Daniel Cross, 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta, and I have proof of everything you've done." The retired chief, sitting 3 tables away, stood up, his face red. "You need to leave. Now, or I'll have you arrested for trespassing and harassment. You're not the chief anymore, Harold. You're a retired pensioner. You have no authority here." I pulled a USB drive from my pocket and held it up. "But the FBI does. And they're very interested in the evidence I've collected. Financial records showing payments from Ricky Salazar to your son's account. Recordings of your son and Officer Caruso discussing which dealers to shake down and which to protect. Testimony from witnesses you intimidated into silence. Salazar stood now too, panic flashing across his face. This is bullshit. You got nothing. I have everything. I looked directly at him, including testimony from Diego Martinez, the kid you were going to kill that night in the alley. The kid whose life I saved. The kid who disappeared because you threatened his family. He's alive. He's talking. And he's bringing you down. That was a lie. I'd never found Diego. But Salazar didn't know that. His panic intensified. Marks tried to sound authoritative, but his voice cracked. You're a convicted felon, a criminal. No one's going to believe. My conviction was overturned 2 weeks ago, I said. Federal judge reviewed the evidence and determined it was a wrongful conviction based on fabricated evidence. I'm not a felon, but you're about to be. The front doors burst open. 12 FBI agents in tactical gear poured into the restaurant, weapons drawn, voices overlapping in a controlled cacophony. FBI, everyone stay where you are, hands where we can see them. The dining room erupted into chaos. Screaming, people diving under tables, chairs scraping, glass breaking. The lead agent, Special Agent Rebecca Torres, late 40s, gray hair pulled back tight, eyes like a predator, walked straight toward me. She glanced at my shoulder, saw the insignia, and gave a curt nod. Colonel Cross. Agent Torres, they're all yours. She turned to Marks, Caruso, Salazar, and the retired chief. Bradley Marks, Vincent Caruso, Ricardo Salazar, you're under arrest for conspiracy, evidence tampering, obstruction of justice, bribery, and deprivation of rights under color of law. Caruso made a move. Stupid. 2 agents tackled him to the ground, cuffed him in seconds. He thrashed, screaming, You can't do this. We're police officers. You were police officers, Agent Torres said coldly. Now you're defendants. Marks just stood there, shaking, as they cuffed him. Tears streamed down his face. My father, you can't. He'll fix this. Your father is being arrested simultaneously at his home, Agent Torres said. Along with 3 other retired officers and 2 active duty commanders who were part of your network. The retired chief tried to run. Made it exactly 4 steps before an agent caught him, swept his legs, put him face down on the marble floor. They cuffed him while he shouted about lawyers and political connections. Salazar just sat down, putting his hands on his head. He knew it was over. Then the doors opened again, and a different tactical team entered. Not FBI, SWAT. Chicago Police Department SWAT, 12 operators in full gear. The team leader, a man I didn't recognize, late 30s, built like a tank, scar across his jaw, stepped forward. He looked at the scene. FBI agents, corrupt cops in handcuffs, me standing in the center wearing Delta insignia. His eyes locked on my shoulder patch, then dropped to the tattoo on my left forearm, visible now that I'd pushed up my sleeve. A coiled snake with the words, De oppresso liber, underneath. To free the oppressed, the motto of Special Forces, the mark that identified me as someone who'd earned the right to wear it. His entire demeanor changed. He dropped to one knee. One by one, every single member of his SWAT team followed suit. 12 operators in full tactical gear, kneeling in the middle of the azure crown, in front of a man they'd thought was homeless. The room went dead silent. The team leader looked up at me. Colonel, we didn't know. If we'd known what they'd done, what the department had done. You know now, I said quietly. And you're going to make sure every case they touched gets reviewed. Every arrest, every conviction, every time they testified. You're going to find every person they framed, every life they destroyed, and you're going to make it right. Yes, sir. You have my word. Good. Agent Torres stepped forward. Colonel, we'll take it from here. Thank you for your service, to the country and to justice. I nodded. Looked one last time at Marks, who was sobbing now, his face buried in his cuffed hands. Looked at Caruso, who was staring at me with pure hatred. Looked at Salazar, who'd gone pale and quiet. Looked at the retired chief, who was being hauled to his feet by 2 agents. You told me I was nobody, I said to the retired chief. You said I didn't matter, that no one would miss me. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. You were wrong, I said. I turned and walked out of the Azure Crown. Behind me, I heard Mark screaming, heard the retired chief trying to bargain, heard the agents reading them their rights. Outside, the cold February air bit into my skin. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, just breathing. 10 years. 10 years of planning, surviving, becoming something they couldn't touch. It was over. Epilogue. 3 months later, Chapter 14. Aftermath. The story hit national news within hours. Video from inside the Azure Crown went viral. SWAT operators kneeling before a Delta Force colonel, corrupt cops dragged out in handcuffs, a retired police chief begging and pleading as he was loaded into a federal van. The FBI investigation moved fast. With the evidence I'd provided, compiled over 7 years with help from military intelligence, they dismantled the entire corruption network. Marks and Caruso both took plea deals, testifying against the retired chief, Salazar, and 17 other dirty cops. In exchange for 20-year sentences instead of life, they confessed to over 40 cases of evidence planting, witness intimidation, perjured testimony, and bribery. 40 cases, 40 lives destroyed. The retired chief got 35 years. Salazar got 40. 3 active-duty police commanders got between 15 and 25 years each. And most importantly, 39 convictions were overturned. 39 people, men and women who'd been framed, who'd lost years of their lives to prison, who'd been forgotten and abandoned, were exonerated. They'd never get those years back. Never undo the damage. But they got something. Justice. And the knowledge that someone had fought for them. My own conviction was formally vacated. Judge Patricia Morrison, who'd sentenced me, issued a public apology. I failed, Mr. Cross, she said at a press conference. I trusted officers who betrayed their oaths, and an innocent man suffered for a decade because of it. I will carry that failure for the rest of my life. It meant nothing to me. Words don't give back 10 years. But the 40 people who walked free, that meant something. Chapter 15. New mission. I returned to Fort Bragg and resumed my position with 1st SFODD. Colonel Harlow called me into his office the day after I got back. That was quite a shitstorm you caused in Chicago, he said, but he was smiling. Yes, sir. The chief of staff called me personally. He was not happy about one of his colonels making national news. I understand if there are consequences. Consequences? Harlow laughed. Cross, you took down one of the most corrupt police networks in the country. You freed 40 innocent people. You reminded everyone that the military still produces people who give a damn about justice. The chief of staff wanted to make sure I told you. Good work. I sat back, surprised. Thank you, sir. That said, you're not doing anything like that again without clearing it through official channels first. Understood? Yes, sir. Good. Now get out of here. Your squadron's running a training exercise in 6 hours. I started a foundation 3 weeks later, the Wrongful Conviction Defense Project. We hired lawyers, investigators, and advocates specifically to help veterans who'd been failed by the justice system. People who'd been framed, forgotten, or screwed over by cops and courts that didn't care. Within 2 months, we had 40 cases. By 6 months, over 200. We couldn't help everyone. But we helped some, and some was better than none. Diego Martinez, the kid from that alley, reached out through our website. He was 28 now, living in Texas, working as a mechanic. He'd spent 10 years looking over his shoulder, terrified Salazar would find him. When I told him Salazar was going to prison for 40 years, he cried. "You saved my life twice," he said. "Once in that alley and once by stopping him." "You didn't need me the second time," I told him. "He was always going to fall eventually. Evil people always do. But you made it happen faster. You didn't give up." "No," I said. I didn't. Chapter 16. Full Circle, May 2026. I took a week of leave and flew back to Chicago one last time. I visited the alley where everything had started. It looked the same, still dirty, still dark, still forgotten by the city. But it didn't hold power over me anymore. It was just a place. The past was the past. I visited Stateville, walked up to the gates, looked at the walls that had held me for 10 years. A guard I didn't recognize approached. "Can I help you, sir?" "No, just visiting old memories." He saw my bearing, probably assumed I was former military. "You serve?" "Still do. Army." He nodded respectfully. "Thank you for your service." I drove to Englewood, to the building where I'd lived in that shitty third-floor apartment. It was still standing, still decrepit. Raphael's bodega was still there, too. I went inside. Raphael, older now, grayer, but still the same kind eyes, looked up from behind the counter. He stared at me for a long moment, recognition slowly dawning. Daniel Cross?" "Hey, Raphael." He came around the counter, grabbed me in a hug. "Dios mío, man. I saw you on the news. You're a colonel? Delta Force?" "Yeah." "And you took down those bastards Marks and Caruso?" "Yeah." He laughed, a huge booming sound. "I knew you were different. I knew it back then. You always walked like a soldier. Even when things were bad, you held your head up." We talked for an hour. I bought a Pernil sandwich, still the best I'd ever tasted, and caught up on neighborhood news. Some things had changed, some hadn't. But Raphael was still there, still helping people, still being a good man in a hard place. When I left, he shook my hand. "You ever need anything, you call me. Anything." "I will. Take care, Raphael." "You too, Colonel." My last stop was the warehouse where I'd worked. Midwest Logistics, still standing, still operating. I stood outside for a while, watching workers shuffle in for night shift. They looked tired, lost, just like I'd been. A young guy walked past me, maybe 25, wearing a faded army jacket. He looked exhausted, defeated, just trying to survive. I stopped him. "You serve?" He looked up, surprised. "Yeah. 2 tours. Iraq. You doing okay?" He shrugged, that universal gesture of veterans who are barely hanging on but don't want to admit it. "Getting by. It's hard, you know, civilian life. Nothing makes sense anymore." I knew that feeling intimately. I'd lived it. I pulled out a business card, clean white cardstock with the logo of my foundation and a phone number. "If you ever need help, job placement, legal assistance, counseling, housing, we help veterans who are struggling. No judgment, no bureaucracy, just people who've been where you are." He took the card, studied it, then looked at me. Really looked at me. Something shifted in his eyes, a flicker of hope in a place where hope had been dying. You really mean that? I spent 10 years in prison for a crime I didn't commit, I said. I know what it's like when the system fails you, when nobody gives a damn. So yeah, I mean it. Call that number. We'll help. His voice cracked. Thank you. Thank your service. You earned this. He nodded, clutching the card like it was a lifeline. Maybe it was. He walked into the warehouse, and I watched him go, hoping he'd make the call, hoping he'd find his way out of the darkness the same way I had. I got back in my rental car and drove to one final destination. Chapter 17. The Homecoming. The cemetery was on the north side, a sprawling field of granite headstones and weathered monuments. I walked through rows of graves until I found the one I was looking for. Sarah Cross, 1952 to 2013, beloved mother. My mother's grave. I hadn't visited since before I'd been arrested. Hadn't been able to. Prison doesn't grant furloughs for cemetery visits. I knelt down, brushed dirt and dead leaves off the headstone. Hey, Mom, I said quietly. Sorry it's been so long. The words felt inadequate. Everything felt inadequate. How do you summarize 10 years to someone who's been dead for 13? I got framed for a crime I didn't do. Spent 10 years in prison, but I survived. I joined Delta Force, became a colonel, took down the people who destroyed my life. I paused. You would have told me to let it go, to forgive and move on. You always believed in turning the other cheek. The wind rustled through the trees overhead. But I couldn't do that, Mom. I couldn't let them win. I couldn't let them keep hurting people. So I became something they couldn't touch, and I made them pay for what they did. I sat there for a long time, just breathing, letting the silence settle. I hope you'd understand, I finally said. I hope you'd be proud, not of the revenge, but of the fact that I survived, that I helped people, that I didn't let them break me. A bird called from somewhere nearby, life continuing, indifferent to human pain and triumph. I miss you, I whispered. Every day. I stood up, saluted the headstone, something I'd never done before, but it felt right, and walked back to the car. Chapter 18. 1 year later, February 2027. I stood in a conference room at Fort Bragg, briefing my squadron on our next deployment. 12 operators, the best in the world, listening intently as I laid out the mission parameters. We'd be operating in East Africa, targeting a terrorist cell that had been kidnapping aid workers. Intelligence indicated 3 hostages were being held in a compound 200 miles from the nearest friendly forces. We'd insert via halo jump, conduct reconnaissance, plan the assault, execute the rescue, and extract within 72 hours. High risk, high reward. Exactly the kind of mission Delta Force existed for. Questions? I asked when I'd finished the briefing. Sergeant Maria Cortez, one of my fellow selectees from 7 years ago, now one of my best operators, raised her hand. Rules of engagement, sir? Minimize civilian casualties. Neutralize hostiles who pose an immediate threat. The goal is rescue first, elimination second. We're not there to start a war. We're there to save lives. Understood, sir. Anyone else? Silence. They were ready. They always were. Good. We deploy in 72 hours. Use the time to prep gear, review intel, and get your affairs in order. Dismissed. They filed out, talking quietly among themselves, already shifting into mission mode. I stayed behind, staring at the map of East Africa on the wall. Colonel Harlow entered, coffee in hand. Good briefing. Thank you, sir. You've come a long way, Cross. From the guy I picked up outside Stateville to one of the best squadron commanders I've ever seen. I had good teachers. You had something most people don't, a reason to be better. Pain that you turned into purpose. He sipped his coffee. How's the foundation doing? We just passed 500 cases. Exonerated 18 people so far, got wrongful convictions overturned for 32 others, currently working on 200 active cases. That's good work, important work. It doesn't bring back the years they lost. No, Harlow agreed. But it gives them a future. That's something. We stood in silence for a moment. The kid you gave the card to outside that warehouse, the one from the Army, Harlow said. He called the foundation, got into our job placement program. He's working now, doing well, even enrolled in community college. I felt something loosen in my chest. Good. You saved his life without firing a shot. That's a different kind of mission, but just as important. It's what my mother would have wanted. Help people, make things better. Harlow nodded. She'd be proud of you. I hope so. He finished his coffee, tossed the cup in the trash. 72 hours. Make sure your team's ready. They will be, sir. He left, and I was alone with the maps and mission briefings. I thought about the kid outside the warehouse. Thought about Diego Martinez, living free in Texas. Thought about the 39 people who'd been exonerated because I'd refused to let corrupt cops win. Thought about the hostages in East Africa who had no idea that in 3 days, 12 ghosts would drop from the sky and bring them home. This was my life now. Soldier, commander, advocate. Someone who fought in the shadows so others could live in the light. It wasn't the life I'd planned when I got off that bus at Union Station 11 years ago. But it was the life I'd earned. The life I'd forged in the fires of injustice, prison, and war. And I was proud of it. Chapter 19. The Restaurant Redux March, 2027. I received an invitation in the mail, forwarded through channels. Expensive cardstock, embossed lettering. The Azure Crown under new management. Grand reopening celebration. You are cordially invited. A note was attached, handwritten. Colonel Cross. We would be honored if you would attend. The previous management made this place a symbol of corruption. We want to make it a symbol of justice. Please come. Marcus Washington, owner Marcus. My cellmate from Stateville. He'd gotten out, stayed clean, apparently made something of himself. And now he owned the restaurant where I'd confronted my demons. I called the number on the invitation. Azure Crown, this is Marcus. Marcus, it's Daniel Cross. A pause. Then, Colonel, you got my invitation? I did. You bought the restaurant? Partnered with a few investors who believe in second chances. The previous owner wanted nothing to do with the place after what happened. Bad publicity, you know. So we got it at a good price. Renovated it. Changed the menu. Changed everything. That's impressive, Marcus. You inspired me, man. You and that letter from Colonel Harlow. You showed me that our past doesn't define us. What we do after defines us. So I got out, worked 3 jobs, saved money, took business classes, and now I'm here. I'm proud of you. Will you come to the reopening? It would mean a lot. I thought about it. The last time I'd been in that restaurant, I'd been wearing homeless rags, confronting corrupt cops, surrounded by FBI agents and SWAT. Going back would be different. Full circle. Symbolic. I'll be there, I said. Chapter 20. The Celebration. The Azure Crown looked completely different. The marble floors were the same, but everything else had changed. New tables, new lighting, new artwork on the walls. Where there had been cold elegance, there was now warmth. Where there had been exclusivity, there was now welcome. The grand reopening was packed. Community leaders, local business owners, veterans from various organizations, and people Marcus had met during his own journey from prison to entrepreneur. I arrived in my dress uniform, Army service uniform, medals on my chest, colonel's insignia on my shoulders. People noticed, heads turned, conversations paused. Marcus saw me from across the room and made his way over, grinning huge. He'd filled out, looked healthy, strong, happy. "Colonel Cross, you came. Wouldn't miss it. This place looks amazing. We wanted to transform it. Turn something that represented corruption and power into something that represents community and hope." He gestured around the room. "Half the staff are people with records. We believe in second chances here. That's what the world needs more of." A woman approached, late 30s, professional but warm. "Colonel Cross? I'm Sarah Bennett, director of the Wrongful Conviction Defense Project Chicago chapter." I shook her hand. "Good to meet you. How's the work going?" "We just got our 15th exoneration last week. A man who'd been in prison for 12 years for a crime he didn't commit. Your foundation made it possible. The lawyers and investigators made it possible. I just provided resources." "You provided hope," she said firmly. "That's more valuable than resources." The evening continued. Speeches, toasts, food that was genuinely excellent. Marcus gave a speech about transformation, about how places and people could change, about how justice wasn't just about punishment, but also about restoration. Then he called me up to the stage. "I want to introduce someone," Marcus said into the microphone. 11 years ago, this man was framed by corrupt police officers, sent to prison for a decade. We met in Stateville. He was my cellmate for a year. And I watched him refuse to break, refuse to become bitter. He used that time to become stronger, smarter, more determined. The room was silent, everyone listening. When he got out, he joined the most elite military unit in the world, became a colonel. Then he came back here to this restaurant and took down the corruption network that had destroyed his life. But he didn't stop there. He started a foundation that's helped hundreds of people. Veterans, wrongly convicted individuals, people the system forgot. Marcus looked at me. "Colonel Daniel Cross is proof that injustice doesn't have to win. That one person, refusing to give up, can change the world." "Colonel?" I stepped to the microphone, looking out at the crowd. Saw faces of all kinds, young and old, wealthy and struggling, people who'd suffered and people who'd helped. "I'm not good at speeches," I began, and a few people chuckled. "But I want to say this. 10 years ago in this building, powerful people decided my life didn't matter. They framed me, sent me to prison, and thought they'd won. They were wrong. They didn't win. Because I refused to let them. And more importantly, because people like Colonel Harlow, like Marcus, like everyone working at the foundation, like all of you, you refused to accept that corruption should win. The system failed me, but people didn't. Good people, who believed in justice, who believed in second chances, who believed that one person's voice matters. Those people saved me. And now we're saving others." I paused, gathering my thoughts. This restaurant used to be a place where corrupt cops made deals and celebrated their impunity. Now it's a place that represents transformation, that represents hope, that represents the truth that no matter how far you fall, no matter how much injustice you face, you can rise again. So thank you, Marcus, for transforming this place. Thank you to everyone who works for the Foundation. Thank you to every person who refuses to accept that corruption and injustice should be the norm. And to anyone here who's struggling, who feels invisible, who thinks the world doesn't care about them, I see you. We see you. And we're fighting for you. The room erupted in applause. People stood clapping, some wiping tears. I stepped down from the stage, and Marcus hugged me. That was perfect, man. Thank you. Thank you for creating this place. The rest of the evening was a blur of conversations, handshakes, people sharing their stories. A woman told me how the Foundation had helped her brother get exonerated after 19 years in prison. A veteran told me about getting help through our job placement program. A young lawyer told me she'd been inspired to join our legal team after seeing the news coverage of the arrests. Small victories, small transformations. But they added up. As the evening wound down, I stepped outside for air. The Chicago night was cold. Stars obscured by light pollution, the city humming with its endless energy. A man approached me, late 20s, wearing a nice suit but moving with the careful wariness of someone who'd learned not to trust the world. Colonel Cross? Yes? I'm Diego Martinez. Everything stopped. I stared at him, recognition clicking into place. The kid from the alley. Older now, a man instead of a teenager, but unmistakably the same person. Diego, I said, you're here. I flew in from Texas, had to meet you in person, had to thank you. His voice was shaking. You saved my life twice. Once that night when Salazar was going to kill me, and once when you took him down and made it safe for me to stop hiding. You don't need to thank me. I just did what was right. That's the thing, though, Diego said. Most people don't. Most people walk away. But you didn't. You stood up for me when you didn't have to. And you paid for it with 10 years of your life. And those 10 years made me who I am now. Made me strong enough to help people. So maybe it wasn't wasted time. Maybe it was preparation. Diego smiled, tears in his eyes. My daughter, she's 5 years old. I named her Daniela, after you. Because you're the reason she exists. If you hadn't stopped Salazar that night, I'd be dead. I never would have met my wife. Never would have had my daughter, never would have lived. My throat tightened. What's her name again? Daniela Sofia Martinez. And she knows the story. Knows that a man named Daniel Cross saved her father's life and asked for nothing in return. He pulled out his phone, showed me a photo. A beautiful little girl with dark curls and a gap-toothed smile, holding a toy soldier. She says she wants to be a soldier like you when she grows up, Diego said, laughing through tears. I couldn't speak for a moment. Just stared at that photo. That little girl who existed because I'd done the right thing in an alley 11 years ago. Tell her, I finally said, that being a soldier isn't just about wearing a uniform. It's about standing up when something's wrong, even when it's hard, even when it costs you, and that I know she'll do that, because her father taught her by example. Diego hugged me, and I let him. This stranger who wasn't a stranger, this kid who'd become a man, this life that had been saved and had created new life. When he pulled back, he said, if you ever need anything, anything at all, you call me. I will. He walked back into the restaurant, and I stood alone on the sidewalk, looking up at the building that had once been a symbol of my worst moment and was now a symbol of transformation. Full circle. Complete. Final chapter. The mirror. 2 weeks later, I was back at Fort Bragg, preparing for deployment to East Africa. Gear laid out, weapons cleaned, mission brief memorized. My squadron was ready. We'd move out in 6 hours. Colonel Harlow knocked on my office door. Got a minute? Of course, sir. He entered, closed the door behind him. I wanted to give you something before you deploy. He handed me a folder. Inside was a photograph, grainy, black and white, taken from a security camera. It showed a young man in an alley, standing over another man on the ground, his posture protective rather than aggressive. The timestamp read, March 15th, 2016, 04:17. Where did you get this? I asked. The FBI recovered it during their investigation. Security camera from a building overlooking that alley. It was in the police evidence files, but was never submitted during your trial. They buried it because it showed exactly what you said happened. You defending yourself and protecting someone else. I stared at the photo. Physical proof. Vindication in black and white. Why are you giving this to me now? Because you need to see it, Harlow said. You need to see proof that you were right, that you did the right thing, that everything you suffered was unjust. I already knew that, sir. Knowing and seeing are different. You've spent 11 years carrying the weight of what they did to you. I want you to put it down now. You won, Cross, completely. You were right, they were wrong, and justice was served. You can let go of the anger now. I looked at the photo for a long time. That young man in the image, 28 years old, naive, thinking the system would protect him, was gone. In his place was someone harder, stronger, forged by injustice into something unbreakable. I'm not angry anymore, I said quietly. Not really. I was, for a long time. But somewhere along the way, the anger turned into purpose, into mission. And now, I paused. Now I'm just grateful. Grateful I survived. Grateful I could help people. Grateful for the second chance. Harlow nodded, satisfied. Good. That's growth. That's winning. He stood to leave, then paused at the door. Your mother, what would she say if she could see you now? I thought about it. About Sarah Cross, who'd raised me alone after my father left, who'd worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat, who'd believed in kindness and forgiveness and second chances. She'd say I took the long way around, I said, smiling. But she'd be proud I got here. I think so too. Safe deployment, Colonel. Bring your people home. Always do, sir. He left, and I was alone with the photograph. I studied it one more time. That moment frozen in time, the moment everything changed, then filed it away in my desk drawer. The past was the past. The future was waiting. 6 hours later, I boarded a C-17 with my squadron. We flew through the night toward East Africa, toward hostages who needed rescue, toward a mission that would save lives. I looked around at my team, operators who trusted me, who I trusted with my life, who would walk into hell if I asked, because they knew I'd walk in first and lead them out. This was my purpose now. Not revenge, not anger. Just mission. Just service. Just doing the right thing, over and over, until the job was done or I was. The kid who'd been framed in that alley was gone. The convict who'd survived Stateville was gone. Even the angry operator who'd confronted his demons in the Azure Crown was fading. In their place, Colonel Daniel Cross, Squadron Commander, Foundation Founder, someone who'd been broken by injustice and had forged himself into something that couldn't be broken again. Someone who'd learned that the system could fail you, but you didn't have to fail yourself. Someone who'd learned that revenge was temporary, but justice was forever. Someone who'd learned that the best response to being told you're nobody is to become someone who makes sure nobody else ever has to hear those words. The C-17's engines roared, carrying us toward another mission, another chance to make a difference. Another opportunity to stand between evil and the innocent. I closed my eyes and thought about Daniela Sofia Martinez, 5 years old, holding a toy soldier, dreaming of being a hero. "Already are, kid," I whispered to the darkness. "Your father's already a hero. And so is everyone who refuses to give up, refuses to break, refuses to accept that injustice wins." The plane flew on through the night, carrying ghosts toward dawn.